Farhan, let's go back to last week. You had said when we wrapped up our hit on Friday, hey, I'm off to Dallas to cover the Stars and the Jets. You were going down to cover the hockey game. And then news broke early Saturday morning that Mark Scheifele's father passed away. How did you hear? How did you handle the day? And what was that situation like now that you're covering more than just a hockey game? Now real life is getting involved.
Yeah, it was entirely different, right? I mean, you do a lot of prep when you go to an event like this, especially, for me, and I don't cover the team year round. I want to make sure that I know all the storylines and everything going into it, all the game trends, who's playing well, all of it. And you go there, and then none of that matters, right? It becomes all about the human element, Mark Scheifele, his family, the organization, how Mark Scheifele's father impacted them, right? I mean, this was a lot of the dads, they wind up knowing each other. The way the NHL works, you get the dad's trips, you get the mom's trips, and they're engaged. And for me, the first time I covered Mark Scheifele was when he played for Canada at the World Juniors. And when we go do that event, we make a point of meeting all the parents, right? And I remember sometimes I met, in that tournament. I don't remember them all, but I remember there was a sign about Mark Scheifele in the game that was a fairly funny sign. I remember talking to his family about that, and just by all accounts, within the Winnipeg Jets organization, this was a person everybody knew, that everybody felt good about, and thought of fondly. And then for that to happen suddenly, right? I mean, I've been around Brock Besser this year in Vancouver, or a year ago, and we all expected his father to pass. And there's been other players where we kind of knew it was coming, but for that to happen, for it to be that sudden, it's hard not to feel for Mark Scheifele. Like, I generally don't care who wins, but in that moment, I think at the end of the game, when he's in the penalty box, how could you not feel crushed, right? Like, just on a human level, whether you care about the Jets or care about the Stars or feel close to Mark Scheifele or you don't, how could you not feel affected by that? So it was certainly a different type of event to cover, and hats off to Mark Scheifele for playing in the game. And, as you mentioned, his dad would have wanted him to, but just for everybody else for rallying around him. It's unfortunate they couldn't have won it, but you could tell that by the time that game ended, all the Jets cared more about Mark Scheifele than the fact that they cared about their season ending. And that speaks volumes.
I'm not sure what it was like in the building, but I can tell you it was incredibly hard to watch on TV, the handshake line. If Scheifele would have skated off the ice, I think everybody would have gave him a free pass, that he wouldn't have to go through any of that, but he did. What a man, what character. But him and Hellebuck hugging, that was the toughest for me to watch, to be like, geez, this. And how they've handled it. And I thought it was a really classy move. Is it Tom Gagliardi that owns the Dallas Stars that offered him the private jet to fly him to Ontario so he could be with his family immediately?
Yeah, I mean, that was the story. I haven't talked to anybody to confirm that, but I have no reason to believe that it wasn't true, because Gagliardi's a class act, BC guy that people out here know well. So it doesn't surprise me that he would do something like that. But, you mentioned Hellebuck. I just think of Adam Lowry going into the penalty box to pull him out. And then you mentioned the handshake line. And I think about Mason Marchment, who recently lost his dad. And, the emotional moment that they had. And Matt Duchene. And then even Jamie Benn, who had, punched Scheifele in the face in the previous game, at the end of that game. And all of them, these weren't just, fist bumps with gloves. They were emotional, meaningful embraces with messages. They cared. I don't think I don't know that the fans of the Dallas Stars were fully engaged on that story. They were just celebrating a win, but the Stars players certainly knew what was going on, and it mattered to them to make sure that Mark Scheifele knew that, hey, look, man, full props. We care about you and respect you for playing, and condolences for what you're dealing with. And it mattered to the Stars going in that lineup as well. And really, look, I'm around a team whose locker room hasn't been good, for much of the last few years. Last year kind of camouflaged it, but this year you could certainly see how good it wasn't. And then when you see an organization like the Winnipeg Jets, and you see just how good and close that room is, it really tells you what it's all about and what it should look like.
Sticking with the Stars, game one the other night, it was 3-1 Edmonton going into the third. And I had started writing a story, for sports and online, because, well, no, Dallas, Skinner was seeing everything. There was no rebounds. There was no traffic, nothing. I'm like, Skinner's going to only let in one, and Dallas is they're going to blow a game here. So I'm doing other stuff, putting the kids to bed, all these other things. And I come back and it's 4-3 Dallas. And I'm like, all right, lesson number one for the 10th time in this playoffs. Do not walk away from the TV because look what happens. As Connor McDavid said, 40 really good minutes, 20 really bad minutes. The epic meltdown. I have renewed faith in this Dallas Stars team. They got a little bit of secondary scoring there, and some guys were getting their first of the playoffs, and a little momentum. And Skinner looked awful in that third period.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I was the same way. My son was in a track meet, so I was, paying attention to the game between heats or between races, and then I turned it off for a bit before his last race, and then I didn't think to turn it back on because not only did the Stars not, they were down 3-1, they weren't even close. Like they had nothing going.
Nothing.
Nothing to indicate that the third period would turn out the way it did. So I turned it back on, and like you, next thing you know, it's 4-3, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I was stunned. And to your point, it wasn't just that they came back; it was who scored the goals. And they still need Jason Robertson to get going. They still need Jamie Benn to get going. But the fact that Sagan could get two, and Duchesne got one, and players that have been really, really quiet for the bulk of these playoffs. And if you would have asked me, and you probably did, like who do I like in that series coming into it? My question was depends, because I think Edmonton is getting everything out of their lineup, and they're getting depth scoring in places they haven't had it before. Their blue line is playing better than at any time that it did last season in the playoffs. And like 5 key stars are doing nothing, guys that had big point totals this year. So if those players show up, we're not talking about depth scoring. We're talking about frontline players, right? Like Matt Duchesne, and he's right, saying we are 3 first lines and a third line, right? So we're not talking about bottom 6 guys typically scoring. So the fact that all of those guys, even though it was on the power play, were able to feel good about themselves and, hey, offensively, okay, I got one. That's the danger. Right, so if you're Edmonton, you could say, look, just stay out of the box and keep the game at 5-on-5, and we're going to be fine. But I don't think it's going to be that simple, because I think the success those Dallas Stars players had at on the power play is going to translate and carry over into the rest of the series at 5-on-5.
I liked how Dallas, when they got the lead, they started imposing their will, and you forgot how good Dallas can be. I read a stat today. Mikko Rantanen has 17 points in 3 or 4 games, and then a couple of points in all the rest. Streaky, he's hot, but a streaky Rantanen here there can really turn the tide. And although he wasn't a major factor in the other game, I just think that if you're the Oilers, he's still dangerous at any time. But now, although you got to start worrying, because when Jamie Benn starts crushing guys in corner, and Jason Robertson, he's not scoring, but are you seeing what I'm seeing? He's doing all the right things defensively. Like hasn't hit the score sheet, but he's not costing his team when he's out there, and he's not pouting. He's playing good Pete DeBoer hockey.
Yeah, you're right, but there's 2 things there. Okay, you're not a liability, or are you generating, right? So in the case of Duchesne and some of these other players, they at least were generating, they just weren't scoring, right? So you kind of felt that their process was good enough that at some point it was going to turn. With Jason Robertson and Jamie Benn, I'm not seeing chances. Yes, they're fine in their own end, but they need to generate and be more noticeable offensively, even if they're not generating points. But if they can do that, and Rantanen, yeah, sure, he's streaky, but he doesn't go cold for very long. Like, he's going to be noticed in this series. And then you've got Heiskanen, who, for the first couple, like for the late stage of the last series, he was just kind of feeling his way in. Now going into this series, they're able to go back to 6 defensemen and not play with 7. He's able to log, into the 22, 23, 24 minutes a night, and he's finding his groove and his touch. And they're so much better offensively when he's in that stage. So, I just think there's a ceiling for Dallas to get to, because when you look at this team, even when they made the trade, they didn't have Heiskanen, they didn't have Rantanen, and they were still doing really well. Right, and then they added Rantanen, and then Heiskanen's back now. So they have the biggest ceiling, in my opinion. Like, we're seeing Florida now play its best hockey in the last 2 games, but I think the ceiling that the Dallas Stars have is even higher. So, if they just have those last finishing pieces that can finally get things going offensively, I think Edmonton could be in trouble.
You and I aren't in the press room, but I find it very entertaining that although they have lost 14 straight games in the Eastern Conference Final. Rod Brindamore, will not accept the fact or acknowledge the fact that his Carolina Hurricanes are losing games. They lost 4 straight last year, but they didn't get swept. It's all in how you present this, right? It's words. Carolina had a system against everybody else in the NHL this year. For whatever reason, it just doesn't apply to the Florida Panthers. They are just like, that doesn't affect us.
Yeah, I know you're right. And, and they play, low event hockey, and they trap it up, and they play a certain style, even though they do have some offensively skilled players. But, when Florida plays its way, and when they play the way Paul Maurice wants, there's a greasiness to their game. There's a roadness, right? Like, they play road hockey, whether they're at home or away. That's just how they play. And, the physicality of their game, it's pretty interesting to watch, right? Like, they're able to dictate the terms and the pace of play in every game they play in, seemingly, right? And, even when the Game 6 against Toronto didn't go as well, they still had their moments, right? So, that Stanley Cup pedigree is kicking in, and Carolina doesn't have it. Carolina's been a great regular season team. People talk about them, and, in terms of being, analytics darlings and what have you, and all of that. But right now, at this time of year, this is when Florida comes to play. And even a guy like Matthew Tkachuk, right, because the team isn't fully dependent on him scoring, even though you can tell he's dealing with injuries and things like that, and he's just not quite right, he still has some bite to his game. And he can still play well defensively. They've got enough pieces around him that they can still generate offensively. So it's a pretty complete team in Florida. It's hard to deny him.
Tomorrow, it's like Christmas if you're a CFL fan. I'm not sure if you're as excited as I am. 4 games on the preseason schedule, and I don't care that they're preseason. I will be all over CFL.ca watching, of course, the marquee matchup. And when the depth charts came out today, and I was like, looks like Mike O'Shea and Corey Mace mean business from game 1, snap 1. A ton of starters are playing Riders, Bombers, including Zach Collaros and Trevor Harris. I know there's going to be 2 games on at the same time, Farhan, but tell me you're watching Riders, Bombers. Maybe you're split screening because you're in the biz, but you got to be paying a little more attention, Riders, Bombers.
Well, in the morning, I'm in Hamilton. So okay. I am covering, I'm calling the CFC Prospects game with the top players in the country that are going to be here, the high school kids. So that'll be focus one. But then after that, you have to watch at least the first quarter and a half, right? I mean, I think that Zach Collaros could play into the second quarter. It sounds like all the quarterbacks are going to play tomorrow for Saskatchewan, and Trevor's going to start. And I think he's the same. I don't think he'll play more than a quarter. I think that would be the max for him. And everyone's kind of in an interesting situation. Naylor and I were talking about this today, that, how do you handle it? Because there's only 2 preseason games. So in a normal year, I wouldn't let Zach Collaros play more than 10 plays, 5 plays max in an entire preseason, because he's such a veteran. Like, he doesn't need it. This year, though, he's not playing in game 1 because he's suspended. And then, so you've got to get him some run now, because it's going to be a while before he plays. And then secondly, they've got a new offensive coordinator in Jason Hogan. So you want to get those 2 guys comfortable together. And, you want to give Hogan a chance to operate as much as he can. And I'm sure the game plan will be pretty vanilla, but you want to get him comfortable with the quarterback in a play calling capacity. Now, if you're Saskatchewan, I would not play Trevor Harris at all. Like, I might do the Nathan Rourke thing where you put him out there, you have him have 3 handoffs and a little flip pass and call it a day, because he's a veteran. He knows what he's doing, and he's been in Mark Mueller's system. So, and he finished the season. So it's not like he missed the last 2 months and didn't finish the season and now wants that time. So I would probably not play Trevor Harris, just from that standpoint, because priority number 1 is to keep him healthy all year. So, interesting how they're doing it, around the league. Vernon Adams is going to play around 25 plays. Trey Ford's not playing at all in that Edmonton-Calgary game, and I think that if I'm them, I understand that Ford's had an injury history, but I probably would play Ford more, because he's going to be learning an entirely different offensive system with a different coordinator, and he has to learn how to go through progressions in ways that his previous coaches didn't teach him, right? So different teams have different reasons. I'm not one anymore that can say none of these starters should play or that they all should play. I think it's different depending on your situation.
I find it interesting that even AJ Ouellette and Jameer, when I saw Ouellette and Thurman and Roland Milligan, I was like, because normally in years past, the vets sit out the road game, play the home game,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, this year it's like, nope, game one snap. Maybe Mace is just tired of everybody fighting each other in practice, and you guys just go fight a bomber. I'm done. Enough. Have you run wind sprints? Did you make the kids run the wind sprints today, Farhan, in Hamilton? These young bucks that are going to be future stars.
No, we definitely didn't do that. They had to walk through their second practice. They've had a lot thrown at them in the last 48 hours. But yeah, like I said, I mean, it's a line, and I'm curious to see how much these guys are going to play. They've still got big rosters. They've got big evaluations that they've got to get done. So, you play these guys in the first preseason game. You can give them more of a rest if there's any kind of a bump and bruise. So I know that enters into some people's thinking. But yeah, generally, most teams do the veteran thing at home, not on the road. So I'm not surprised Winnipeg is dressing as many as they are. I am surprised Saskatchewan is dressing as many as they are. But hey, more of a reason for you and I to watch.
And that we will be. Have a great call tomorrow.